to strike the count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Matthew Moreno, Blake Williams, here to talk NLDS, Dodgers versus Diamondbacks. Matt, this wasn't on my bingo card to see the Diamondbacks in the NLDS against the Dodgers, but here we are.
Yeah, if anybody was watching our Sunday night show, they might be know that I'm a little surprised by this as well. I didn't really see the Diamondbacks advancing past the Brewers, and I'm not, spoiler alert, not necessarily anticipating the Diamondbacks advancing past the Dodgers, but I'll save that in terms of detail for later in the show.
Yeah, one person not surprised was our guy Blake Williams over here, who went from being terrified of Brewers pitching potentially in the NLDS to picking the Diamondbacks over the Brewers.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the randomness of postseason baseball. You can never count any team out, really, and the Diamondbacks do have some good young players. I kind of hyped them up a little bit in the offseason as a team that could make some noise, so let's give myself a little humble brag there. But, I mean, they're a good team. They were a tough out for the Dodgers earlier in the season when they were stealing all the bases and everything, but I'm sure we'll get into that. So the Dodgers started playing them better, but it should be a fun series.
Yeah, it's an interesting season line because you see the Dodgers went 8-5, and you're like, yeah, that's pretty good. You know, that sounds about right for a team like the Diamondbacks. And then you remember, because this was so long ago, I mean, literally in March, that the Dodgers played the Diamondbacks 8 times in the first 10 games of the season. So they played them, only 5 times basically after the 2-week mark of the season, all 5 in the second half, and the Dodgers won all 5 of those. So it's an interesting sort of back and forth as we'll get to some pitching matchups. Another interesting note here is that the game 1 starters and the game 2 starters all pitched against each other like a month and a half ago when the Dodgers and Diamondbacks matched up. So tons to get to there. But let's do this. Here's the plan. We're going to talk about today. The Dodgers had some media availability. Dave Roberts spoke. Freddie Freeman spoke. Clayton Kershaw spoke. So we'll get to that. And then we'll get to some of the biggest storylines, things to watch. We'll make some predictions, X factors, all that stuff. But let's start with what happened at Dodger Stadium today. And Matt, I'll come to you. Kershaw was up there. Freddie Freeman was up there. Dave Roberts. It didn't seem like there was anything crazy that was mentioned today. But what caught your eye at Dodger Stadium today?
Honestly, it was Clayton Kershaw sort of peeling the curtain back on himself a little bit and touching on some of the nerves and maybe pressure that he has felt throughout his career in the postseason. And he said, nerves are normal. You're going to have those all the time. And it's just a matter of, how you sort of control them and view it. And he said in the past, something, I don't want to mess up the quote, basically something to the effect of he used to be worried about failing on a big stage, and that now he doesn't necessarily think of it that way. It's more of appreciating the opportunity to pitch in October and be in these postseason games. And I'm not doing it any justice. We have his full interview on our YouTube channel. So after we're done here, after everybody's done engaging with us tonight, I definitely recommend that you guys go and check it out, because it was a nice interview from Kershaw.
Blake, anything that caught your attention? We had some classic Dave Roberts moments where he said some things that may mean nothing or may mean a whole lot of thing. Was there anything that you heard?
I think Freddie Freeman talking about how they need to get the big hits this postseason, because we always talk about how hitting with runners in scoring position is such a challenge for the Dodgers in October. Seems like that every year besides 2020, basically. So Freeman brought that up and said they need to be better. He pointed out how bad they were last season at it, and it kind of led to their downfall. So moving forward, it's easier said than done, but it's good that it's on their mind. It's something they need to focus on and pay attention to.
Yeah. The one thing that caught my mind, and we're going to get into some of the pitching stuff, he was asked about Ryan Pepio, Lance Lynn, the plan for Game 3, and I don't know. It felt like a whole lot of Dave Robertsing as far as quotes there, stuff that will probably seem totally meaningless and obsolete by the time they actually announce who's going to pitch in Game 3 and what it's going to be. But we'll get into that stuff more specifically in just a little bit. Matt, there was a simulated game on Wednesday at Dodger Stadium as well. Reports of, was it Mookie Betts hit a home run off of Lance Lynn in that game?
Yeah, so Mookie, the Dodgers, they tweeted out the video last night my days were Thursday night of Mookie, hitting a home run and then rounding the bases. And it was framed, dare I say, edited as such so that you could not see the pitcher. Now, going into the inter-squad game last night, Dave Roberts had already revealed that it would be Lance Lynn and Gavin Stone, both, getting a chance to face some batters, log some innings, and keep their arms moving. And so on social media, obviously speculation ran rampant. And today during the interviews, Freddie Freeman was asked about the inter-squad games, just having fans at the one on Wednesday and kind of the point system that the teams had and how it went. And he just, casually said, it was basically for bragging rights. He said, Mookie got the home run off Lance Lynn, but that the blue team won. And so it was very much in passing, but, it's something that I know a lot of fans were wondering about. And I think Lance Lynn was probably the safe bet to be who was on the right end of Mookie's homer.
Yeah. It's one of those things that Freddie probably thought no big deal here, and that was all right. Twitter cared about. It was like, yep, confirmed. Lance Lynn giving up home runs to Mookie Betts. So amazing stuff. Well, let's get into some of the biggest storylines that come out. Again, Dodgers 8-5 against the Diamondbacks. They swept them August 28th through 30th. They won all 5 of their second half meetings. And I keep emphasizing, Blake, you and I beat the randomness of the MLB playoff drum constantly. The Diamondbacks were an under 500 team in the second half of the season. They lost 4 straight games to end the regular season. And then they went into Milwaukee, a team that was 8 games better, that had about 150, a plus 150 run differential compared to the Diamondbacks, and beat them twice, 6-3, 5-2, pretty comfortably in both of those cases. So, Blake, I'll start with you. When you think of storylines for the upcoming potentially 5-game series between the Dodgers and Diamondbacks, what's the number one thing that you're curious and interested in?
So for me, it's how the Dodgers pitching is going to hold up. It's kind of been our question for the last few months, and they performed pretty well down the stretch. They were one of the better staffs in baseball, but we're still relying on a lot of question marks, like how is Kershaw going to be in the postseason? How is Bobby Miller and Ryan Pepiot going to be making their postseason debuts? There's just so many variables and factors. Like, we know they're going to bullpen a lot and rely on openers and all that kind of stuff. So how is Dave Roberts going to manage that? And then also just like on the lesser end of what I'm looking for, like how do the Dodgers come out of their inter squad games with the intensity? Because last year it seemed like they didn't have that level of intensity that they need to have in the postseason. And that might've been from the multiple days off, but they tried to increase that intensity in their workouts. So we'll see if that kind of transfers over into the postseason.
Yeah, we're going to get to the Game 3 debate here in just a second, but I'm going to put you guys on the spot right here, just early on in this one. Matt, which Dodgers pitcher do you have the most confidence in as a starter between Bobby Miller and Clayton Kershaw?
Oh, man.
Blake, prepare yourself. No, both or neither, because this question's coming for you next.
Yeah, I guess I'll still give the edge to Kershaw just because of the veteran experience. And he's been through this before. And he said it today in his interview that, what kind of changed for him during his last couple regular season starts that were better results wise in terms of when he first came off the IL was he said he stopped chasing things, which I think we could read between the lines. And that's probably velocity, although he declined to then elaborate. But I'll go with him just because, Bobby Miller has obviously the health, the potential, but I worry about this being his first taste of postseason baseball.
Okay, Blake, I'm fascinated on this one. You're a guy who likes to stick to his guns when he makes a take, and you were sour on Clayton Kershaw a few weeks ago. Are you all in on Bobby Miller and the stuff as the guy you're more confident in?
Well, if you won't let me say Ryan Pepiot as an answer, I'm gonna say Bobby Miller. And it's for the reason that I think stuff plays up in the postseason, and he's looked really good down the stretch recently. He's been striking a lot of guys out. He's been going deep into ball games. It's just that stuff is kind of unmatched. He probably has the best stuff on the Dodger pitching staff. He has 4 pitches he can work with. So if one isn't working, then he can go to his secondary or third pitches there to keep getting outs. Well, for Kershaw, he's relying mainly on his slider right now. So if the slider's not working, then his fastball is not going to be able to get many outs. And I just think the margin of error is lower for him. So I'm more confident in Kershaw than I was when he first came back and he was walking everyone and allowing homers. And like that Miami starts the one everyone points to, and he can be effective. It's just, I think he has a much smaller margin of error. So I'm going to bet on Bobby Miller being the guy.
Yeah. I'm with Matt. I mean, in my position, this isn't going to be a surprise to anybody. I just think Kershaw is going to be able to figure it out. I think they've gotten some rest, and I'm not saying he's 100%, but the last couple of starts have been better. The velocity even ticked up. We got a 90.1, I believe, fastball last time he was out. So I don't know what Blake keeps talking about stuff, Matt. Come on, that's got to be a high number on the stuff metric. 90.1 mile an hour fastball from Kershaw. But one thing that'll be interesting is the handedness piece. So the Diamondbacks leadoff hitter Corbin Carroll is dramatically better against right-handed pitching than he is against lefty. However, their 2 through 5 hitters are all dramatically better against lefties than they are against righties. So if you want to play that card a little bit, there might be an advantage for Bobby Miller when you compare these two guys. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. Now let's go to game 3 and how we see that playing out. Because when you talk pitching, even if, well, let me stay on Kershaw real quick because there is one other storyline. Will Clayton Kershaw pitch game 4 if there is a game 4? I think is a massive question. It would be on normal rest, which he has not done since coming back. And yet, Matt, Dave Roberts has said that he could do it. Was it Dave or Kershaw? Somebody said, I believe it was yesterday, he could pitch. So do you think he'll be ready in game 4 if they need him?
Kershaw will make himself available for game 4. Andrew Friedman said that they have confidence in him, and then Kershaw basically echoed that and said, yeah, like he would be fine doing it. He'll be ready. I'm curious to see if it's a scenario where the Dodgers are maybe up 2-1 heading into that game 4. Part of me wonders, do they try to piece it together, bullpen game, push Kershaw to a game 5, let Bobby Miller then start a game 1 of the NLCS should you advance? I don't have there's nothing that's necessarily been said that makes me lean that way other than Clayton Kershaw finished the regular season only starting on Saturdays. Every start in the second half after he came off the IL was on some form of extra rest, whether it was 1 day or a little bit more extreme when I think he went like 9 days between starts. So because of that, it's not the World Series where, hey, we might need you to just start this one final game of the year and then that's it. You'll be good because there still would be 2 more rounds after the NLDS, hopefully, right? So part of me wonders if maybe the Dodgers, if they're up 2-1 and the season isn't on the line, do they just kick the Kershaw can down the road, get him the extra rest again, and see how that goes?
Yeah, there's no chance if they're down 2-1 and Kershaw's staring down the end of what could be his career, if we're being honest, that he doesn't pitch in game 4. Blake, do you agree with Matt that depending on the score of the series basically will determine whether or not Kershaw goes in game 4?
Yeah, I think so. I think their entire pitching staff after game 2, I think kind of depends on how they come out of the first 2 games. If they're down in the series, I think they could say, hey, Ryan Pepiot, you're starting game 3. But if they're up, then maybe it's Lance Lynn. If they're tied, I'm not really sure. I'd hope they go with Pepiot, but we'll see what they do. But regarding Kershaw, it's the same thing. If they do have him go game 4, I think it'd be on a pretty limited basis just because he hasn't pitched on normal rest in so long. And honestly, as you mentioned, it might depend on what Kershaw's planning after the season. If he's planning on retiring, he might say, let me go out there and give it my all. This is my last opportunity, my last postseason. But if he might be leaning toward coming back, maybe he'll say, let's play it a little safer. Worst case scenario, we have another year. So I don't think they're set on anything yet totally. It doesn't seem like it's ruled out that he could go in game 4, but I still probably wouldn't bet on it.
Yeah, and obviously how he pitches in game 1 will probably have a big role to play. If it's 5 innings, 1 run, and 75 pitches, then he's probably more available for game 4 versus if it's 5 innings, 3 earned, 98 pitches, that might be a little bit tougher for him to bounce back. Let's get to the other piece of this, which is what will they do in game 3? I think we all are in agreement that we would love for it to be Ryan Pepiot because of how good he has been. I mean, I say we. I maybe our traditionalist Matt Moreno over here might like the veteran presence of Lance Lynn, but Matt, talk us through what was said today at the press conferences about Pepiot and about Lance Lynn.
Yeah, so Dave kind of started laying the foundation of there being some moving away from Lance Lynn, if you will. I think during the final week of the regular season or final 10 days when he said, I already had a conversation with him a couple weeks ago about he's a starter right now, but in the postseason, I'm not necessarily sure what his role would be. We need buy-in, blah, blah, blah. And it seemed like Lynn is on board with that. When he's been asked about Lance Lynn since then, both yesterday during Dave Roberts' media availability and then today when discussing Pepio, he basically said both pitchers are going to factor at separate times. Yesterday was Lance Lynn. He said he'll factor into game 3 because he was throwing in the inter-squad game. So he said that obviously rules him out for games 1 and 2, which I think we knew anyway. So he said, the earliest he would be available would then be game 3. So that's when he would, potentially factor in. When he was asked about Ryan Pepio today, and Pepio also it wasn't an intra-squad game, but he did face some batters. He said the same thing about Pepio, that, I see him potentially being a factor in game 3. So to me, I think as we just alluded to, how the series looks after the first 2 games, I think could potentially influence that decision, although that isn't necessarily the Dodgers' MO is under Friedman. But, I don't really see a scenario where you're going to use Lance Lynn and Ryan Pepio in the same game. I also don't see a scenario where, Lance Lynn is pitching out of the bullpen.
Yeah.
And so kind of, yes, we're discussing game 3 right now, and we'll probably get to it later. I've mentioned it before. Like, if you're not committed to Lance Lynn as a starter, like, he shouldn't be on the NLDS roster, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. You don't actually think they'll leave him off, though, do you?
I don't think so, because I think that they'll want him basically as worst case scenario, like an emergency starter. If Kershaw went really short, if Bobby Miller goes really short, and then you've taxed your bullpen the first 2 games, Lance Lynn, they traded for him because he eats innings,
baby.
They needed an innings eater at the deadline, and so they might, not that you're going to punt a postseason game by any means, but if you need a little bit of length and hopefully, a little bit of good fortune on your side, then they'll be kind of pressed into using Lynn.
Okay, Blake, I'm going to put you on the spot and rapid fire here. It's got to be quick. Lynn or Pepio, who gets the ball first in game 3?
Pepio.
Okay. I'm with you. I think that quote that Dave Roberts had about having already had a conversation with Lance Lynn that basically said, hey, nothing is guaranteed to you just because you're a veteran. I'm paraphrasing. To me, that speaks volumes. And if they believed that at any point, Ryan Pepio has done nothing to convince them that they shouldn't reward him with a game 3. I think the one scenario, the one that Matt lays out, where if you only get like 5 or 6 total innings out of Miller and Kershaw, then maybe you go with the Lance Lynn. But I mean, Pepio's been able to give them length too. So, just throw your best guy out there first and see what happens is what I would say. All right. Next storyline here, Matt. I'll come to you with this one. We've got pitching, which I think we would all agree is the biggest storyline. What happens with Kershaw? How does Miller fare? Who pitches game 3? That's probably numbers 1, 2, and 3 in the biggest storylines of this series for the Dodgers. What do you got?
Yeah, so still sort of related to that, but taking a little bit broader scope, is how the NLDS roster ends up being put together. Dave Roberts, when he was speaking with us on Thursday, he initially said, I think now that we see that it's the Diamondbacks, I think we are leaning 13 pitchers, which is the maximum they can carry, and 13 position players. Then in some follow-up questions after that, he said, well, maybe we do end up going 14 position players and 12 pitchers. And what it sort of seems like they're still debating is whether or not to carry 3 left-handed relievers, was my interpretation of Dave Roberts' quote. And further, kind of reading in between the lines, I took that to be Alex Vesia, Caleb Ferguson, and Ryan Yarbrough. I think, like you mentioned earlier in this show, the top of the Diamondbacks lineup hitting lefties much better than righties after you get past Corbin Carroll, I think could potentially be a factor in maybe Yarbrough being left off, which I think is fine. I guess I just don't necessarily know if then that means somebody like, Colton Wong should make the roster, just because I don't know how much are you really going to use him.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't necessarily go a 14th position player instead of Yarbrough, but another right-hander, possibly. But also, I mean, those options are kind of slim in terms of who's already kind of a given to be on with the team and the injuries.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think how, they end up deciding on their 26 players is going to be interesting for me.
Blake, how do you see this playing out?
I think they're going to carry 13 pitchers, and realistically, if they don't want to carry 3 lefties, it opens up a spot for Lynn and Grove to both be on the roster. I think we all kind of had those as like the bubble guys who might be on, might be off. They basically had 4 pitchers for 3 spots. So if you're dropping one of the lefties, then you allowed all those guys to get on it. So I just don't see any point in carrying Colton Wong on the roster. Like,
Yeah,
the pitching just gives you so much more like versatility in what you can do, especially with all the question marks about their pitching staff. Like if they don't want to carry Lynn, Michael Grove is a guy who could go multiple innings. You have Emmett Sheehan who could go multiple innings, and you have Ryan Yarbrough who could go multiple innings. So they just have a lot of options in their bullpen already. And I think if you can just add to that, like you're not getting any value out of Colton Wong, if we're being honest. Like he might come in and play a few innings on defense, but I think the pitcher's just more valuable.
Yeah. And do you think it'll be Grove?
I think Grove is going to be on the roster just because it is the Diamondbacks, and like you mentioned about the righties, so I think he'll probably end up on it.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot because, again, you're probably going to want to get a lefty in to face Corbin Carroll at some point, but they have him so well protected with guys that hit lefties behind that you would have to bring the lefty in kind of the number 8 hole. So then it's 8-9-1, and then you get Corbin Carroll against a lefty there. At that point, like how often do you really want to do that? And therefore, does Ryan Yarbrough need to be a guy that's rostered because of that? It is an interesting sort of dilemma. So I'm with you. I think Grove ends up making this roster. And I guess, yeah, I mean, Yarbrough feels like the odd man out. Matt, do you agree with that? Do you think Grove makes it and Yarbrough's on the outside looking in?
Yeah, I think that's probably the route they'll end up going. And I see, in some of the comments, people are saying to drop Ahmed Rosario. He provides too much versatility, I think, defensively, and he is arguably their fastest player on the team. And so I don't see that happening. And there is support for Colton Wong. And yeah, he did, to his credit, he performed well in kind of the limited opportunities he was given. I just, in the postseason, things change a little bit. And I just don't, like you said, I don't see him getting many opportunities to really warrant a roster spot over some of the other players we've discussed.
Yeah. And look, and if it's not going to happen in the NLDS, they're definitely going to take 13 pitchers for a potential 7-game series in the NLCS if they get there. So something to keep an eye on there as well. Another storyline that I think is an interesting one is just how the Dodgers can get to, if the Dodgers can get to Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen. If you saw the preview show that I did with Jeff Erickson from RotoWire this morning, we went through how these guys have performed against the Dodgers this year, and it's awful. These guys have been train wrecks against the Dodgers, and both these guys are good pitchers, by the way. Merrill Kelly has made 3 appearances against the Dodgers. He has lasted just 14 1/3 innings, and in 14 1/3 innings, he's allowed 32 base runners. That's not a misspeak right there. 32 base runners in 14 1/3 innings, just 9 strikeouts. His last outing against the Dodgers, August 29th, 5 innings, 12 hits, 7 earned runs. He's walked 11 batters in those 3 games. Zach Gallen, on the other hand, has faced the Dodgers twice, 10 innings pitched for him. In 10 innings, he's allowed 21 base runners and 11 earned runs against them. So if the Dodgers can get to those two, who, by the way, would be the Game 4 and Game 5 starter, they're good pitchers, and yet the Dodgers have hit them well. So I think that's a huge one, because the other piece of this is the Diamondbacks have the 18th best bullpen ERA over the last few months. So they don't have a very good bullpen. So if you can get to starters and get into the bullpen more quickly, then all of a sudden it's a domino effect. And that's kind of the Dodgers' sort of secret superpower when it comes to postseasons, is the ability to take pitches, the ability to work walks, the ability to force starting pitchers out of games more quickly. Then you start seeing relief pitchers more than the other team wants. You see them a few times in a series, and that kind of opens up the Dodgers to have some success against them. And so I'm curious, Blake, I'll come to you first. Like, as good as Kelly and Gallen's numbers have been this season on the whole, are you encouraged by how well the Dodgers seem to have seen them so far this year?
Yes and no. It's always good when you know your opponent as a hitter. A lot of times, like if a hitter changes leagues, they tend to have some problems usually adjusting to seeing all the new pitchers because they're not used to it. So I think there is a benefit in knowing your opponent and your pitchers there. But also, like, I feel like this is just going to be the go-to for everything. Like the postseason's just so random. Like, it wouldn't shock me if Merrill Kelly, I think there's a stat today that said he was 0-11 versus the Dodgers in his career or something, like, and most of the comments on it were like,
Blake, do not do it. Do not. I know where your head is going, and I'm going to ask you not to do it.
I won't say it, but I think everyone knows what I'm implying here. Like, that's just baseball setting up for the jokes here. Like, that's just baseball. So, I mean, yeah, I guess that's my answer there.
Yeah, geez Louise. Just it's unbelievable. You never fail to entertain me, Blake. I'll give you that. Matt, do you think, I mean, like, how much stock do you put in the fact that the Dodgers have seen Gallen twice and 5 and 6 earned runs in those two appearances? They've seen Kelly 3 times, and the first outing was okay. And the last two, he allowed 11 runs in those two outings. How much stock do you put in that?
Oh, I think a little bit. I mean, it can't be brushed aside completely. Now, of course, like Blake alluded to, if one of them were to really turn it around in the playoffs, would I be fully surprised by that? No, just because baseball can be funny and if not cruel that way.
Yeah.
But the Dodgers, it similar to last year with the Padres. I think there is a benefit to your playoff opponent being somebody that you saw a bunch of times during the regular season. And in this case specifically, I think it could end up helping the Dodgers significantly, especially when, like you said, the Diamondbacks probably are looking at Kelly and Gallen to potentially start 4 of the 5 games. But, if it gets to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Some other storylines, just brief ones. I know people want to make a big deal out of stolen bases. The Diamondbacks stole 14 bases against the Dodgers this year. Were only caught stealing 1 time. As I dug into it, in the 5 games that these teams played, not in the first 2 weeks of the series when nobody really knew what was going on with stolen bases, in the 5 games since, the Diamondbacks only attempted steals in 2 of the 5 games, and they were 2 for 3. So, Matt, are you buying or selling that stolen bases will be a huge storyline in this 5-game set?
I think they will be, but I'm cheating with my answer because I think if the Diamondbacks don't run as much as people thought, that will be a storyline. If the Diamondbacks do run and are stealing a bunch of bases, it'll be a storyline. If the Dodgers are throwing them out a bunch, that'll be a storyline. So I cheated. I think one way or another, yes, it will be a proverbial headline. Maybe just not in the sense that everybody might be thinking.
Blake, for some reason, I thought we had Matt and not Scott on the show tonight. I must have sent the link to the wrong place. Blake, do you think the Diamondbacks run wild this week?
I don't think you're going to like my answer here, but it might depend on if Austin Barnes is starting game 1 and game 5 with Kershaw.
Hey, the good news is there's no chance they could start Austin Barnes, the guy who has the worst arm strength and the worst pop time in the league, against a team that steals as many bases as the Diamondbacks, right? Like, they just can't do it. It'd be malpractice.
He's Kershaw's catcher, though. He has been for quite a while now. I'm not sure when the last time Will Smith caught Kershaw was, but it's been a bit. And on the other hand, like, the more serious answer here is I don't really think the Diamondbacks have a chance if they're not stealing bases. I think that's their best path to winning. They have to kind of be that annoying team that's going to take some walks, get some bloop singles, and steal bases against you to end up beating the Dodgers, because the Dodgers are the more talented team, if we're all being honest here. Like, I think we all know that. So the Diamondbacks, they kind of have to play that style of baseball. That's how they were successful early in the season against the Dodgers, and when they weren't stealing bases, they weren't successful. So I kind of take Matt's side here. It's going to be like, if the Diamondbacks aren't stealing, it's a storyline. If they are stealing, it's a storyline. So, yeah, it's definitely going to be talked about.
So Austin Barnes caught the last 2 starts that Clayton Kershaw made, but when Kershaw started in Seattle, it was Will Smith behind the plate. August 29th against the Diamondbacks, it was Will Smith behind the plate as well. That was a game that went well for the Dodgers. I'm just, I'm not necessarily saying those two things are the same, but
Jeff is coping right now.
Look, I've already said I'm going to lose my mind if Austin Barnes is starting in game 1. And I mean, like, I know this is like, if we could just put the Austin Barnes jokes aside. Like, I know you guys like to poke at me with Austin Barnes. I actually don't think you believe Austin Barnes is as good as the role that you play on this show, just to bug me at times. Matt, it would be crazy defensively and offensively if Austin Barnes started, because it means you're either taking Will Smith or JD Martinez out of that would be crazy. That would be crazy, right?
Yes, and I want to say I don't see Will Smith not starting game 1. I mean, I'm fairly certain Will Smith will be in the lineup. Like, I don't think...
Will JD Martinez be in the lineup?
Assume based off what Dave Roberts said today, yes. So yeah, I mean, I don't see Barnes starting game 1.
Blake?
Yeah, it's gonna be Will Smith. I'd bet on that. I'm pretty confident in that. But, like, if I saw Austin Barnes' name in the lineup next to Kershaw's, I just wouldn't be totally shocked.
I'm gonna I will be losing my mind. We'll put it that way. Okay, I see we got a super chat from Laura who's asking, did the Diamondbacks run on the Brewers? I was just looking that up for you, Laura. It looks like in game 1, the Diamondbacks had 2 steals and were caught stealing twice. So they were 2 for 4 in game 1. And in game 2, they did not attempt a steal. So 2 for 4 is not awesome. Like that'll scare you into stopping running if 50% of the time you're getting thrown out. Corbin Carroll, one of the people that was thrown out. So an interesting stat there. Blake, do you just think this was kind of just a matter of the Diamondbacks, as far as the Dodgers go, the Diamondbacks jumped out. They were ahead of the curve on stolen bases. The Dodgers hadn't really adjusted. They still had Noah Syndergaard on the roster. He probably started 2 of those games as a guy who had no hope against the running game. Do you think it's as simple as that? And that sort of, when you look at the big picture, maybe it's not a fair representation of present day?
There's probably some truth to that for sure. I think the Diamondbacks are still a pretty good club at stealing bases and just running on the base paths. But yeah, I do think that's fair to point out. The Diamondbacks were ahead of it. They took advantage of it. We all know Syndergaard couldn't stop a base runner to save his life. So yeah, there's definitely some truth to that.
Matt, any less thoughts on this, just sort of this stolen base conversation?
Yeah, I think just to kind of put a bow on it, you guys started to touch on it. Dave Roberts did say that, he thinks the Dodgers were caught by surprise, like you said, of how aggressive the Diamondbacks were. And I think the Royals also, did the same thing to them early in the season. So he said the Dodgers need a little bit of time to adjust. And then he said, I don't want to blame one person. And then proceeded to highlight how much Noah Syndergaard struggles with holding runners on. Amazing. And so I thought that was kind of funny too. And then, he did say that the Dodgers also just improved internally with varying their times or getting quicker to the plate with their pitches, varying the different looks and pickoff throws and stuff like that. So, yeah, but I thought I'm not going to blame one person, but.
Yeah. And I mean, look, Clayton Kershaw in game 1, he's a lefty. He's a guy that, of all the Dodgers pitchers, is by far the best at holding runners on. And then secondly, of Bobby Miller, who is a rookie, is a righty. Those are not necessarily ideal things for holding runners on. But if you can't really do either of those 2 things, throw 101 miles an hour, and that'll give your catcher, an extra couple tenths of a second to try and get the ball down to second base. So I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think Kershaw will probably be able to manage the running game. And then I think Bobby Miller, we'll see. Once you get to Pepio and, Lance Lynn, for example, like Lance Lynn would probably be a mess. Lance Lynn would probably not be awesome. That's just a guess. Maybe the numbers tell me that I'm crazy and I'm wrong on that one. But a couple other random storylines here. The depth of the Dodgers versus the depth of the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks kind of just run their 9 guys out there and don't really mess around. I don't believe they had a single pinch hitter. So they switched their catcher in game 2 because their catcher got hurt, and then they brought in a defensive sub at third base. But I don't believe there were any pinch hit opportunities that the Diamondbacks had in 2 games against Milwaukee, which I think is an advantage for the Dodgers because Dave Roberts can make decisions about who to go to in the bullpen without having a huge fear of, well, what if they pinch hit? Because they just don't have dudes on the bench. Whereas the Dodgers will have some opportunities. All righties coming out of the rotation for the Diamondbacks. And so the Jason Hayward types, David Peralta types, maybe will all be in there. But when the Diamondbacks go to a lefty, let's say they go to a lefty in the 5th or 6th inning, and Hayward's up, that's going to be where there's interesting decisions for Dave Roberts. Do you take Hayward out in that spot, knowing that most of their good arms in the bullpen are all righties? And so you're going to want Jason Hayward in there later in the game. Those are some interesting decisions there. So I would say, Matt, that's a huge advantage for the Dodgers, is just having guys on the bench that they clearly have a higher level of trust in than the Diamondbacks do.
Yeah, and I think this, kind of ties into Blake's point earlier of the Dodgers just having a I don't want to put words in his mouth, so I'll say this is me saying like a much better, significantly better roster. And of course, games aren't played on paper. I'm fully aware of that. But, I think that's why most people, I think, are probably expecting the series to go a certain way. And, the Dodgers having those options, it definitely pays off as you get into, if the series does go to a 4th or 5th game, that's where I think you really see those different chess moves and pieces really being of value.
Blake, and I'll throw the bullpen in here too. Like we can talk about the 2 starting pitchers, and on paper you would probably rather have Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen than Clayton Kershaw and Bobby Miller, given where we are today and the performance of those guys if you're just looking at season performance. And yet those two guys have struggled against the Dodgers. You've got Bobby Miller's stuff playing up. You've got Clayton Kershaw being Clayton Kershaw, but then take everything else, the bigger picture. The Dodgers bullpen is dramatically better. The Dodgers bench is dramatically better. How big of an impact do you see those things having on a 5-game series? Or do you think that maybe, having 3 or 4 pinch hitters can be way overblown in, a best of 5?
I think in theory it helps, but in games it always doesn't play out like that.
Yeah.
And more options also means more decisions for a manager to make. And I'm not saying Dave Roberts isn't going to make the right ones or manage it terribly, but the more variables you add into anything, there's more possibilities where things can go wrong. And like you mentioned, the scenario of Hayward batting in the 5th inning against a lefty, and then are you taking him out, and then is it going to cost you later in the game?
Yeah.
So there's just so many variables that go into it. I think at the end of the day, teams would always rather have more depth, but sometimes it is more beneficial just to run out the same 9 guys every day, let them play, and not have to worry about anything else. And you know who your top relievers are every given night, and the simplicity can be a factor and beneficial too.
Yeah. Let me ask you one more question here before we do X factors, and then we'll get to some predictions and to some, we'll do Q&A and we'll end with some predictions. The Dodgers have talked about using an opener potentially. Caleb Ferguson was a name that was mentioned, Brusdar Graterol, Shelby Miller, names that were mentioned. Given the way that the NLDS sets itself up with all the rest days off and Kershaw's available, Bobby Miller's available, you're choosing between starters and Pepio and Lance Lynn. But then maybe more importantly, what I highlighted earlier about just the splits of the guys at the top. So I mentioned Corbin Carroll. Corbin Carroll's got a 721 OPS against lefties and a 917 OPS against righties. So he's about 200 points better against right-handed pitching than he is against lefties. So you'd say, oh, Caleb Ferguson, put Caleb Ferguson in the opener, shut down Corbin Carroll. Well, here's the problem. I mentioned the Diamondbacks don't mess with their lineup. Marte, Pham, Walker, Montero are the 2 through 5. Marte has a 50-point better OPS against lefties. Walker's 122 points better against lefties. Montero is 220 points better against lefties. So as much as we've talked about the opener, Blake, I'll come to you first. I don't see the Dodgers really using an opener at any point just because, I mean, I guess it would have to be a righty, right? You can't throw Caleb Ferguson up there against the 1 through 5, can you?
No, I don't think they'll do that. I think when Dave Roberts was talking about that, it was more a possibility for possibly the Brewers, or I just don't see it making sense with the Diamondbacks. The opener still makes sense in the fact that you're not going to have your next pitcher go against the top of the order 3 times, and you're going to limit their 3 best hitters against him. You get one of your high leverage arms against those guys. So it's beneficial, and if you have Brusdar Graterol there, who's pretty neutral in his splits, it makes sense. But yeah, I don't see Caleb being an option for this series.
So do you think Graterol would be a starter at some point this series?
If they decide to use an opener, I think it would be Graterol doing it, yeah.
And would they do it? They wouldn't do it game 1 or game 2, though, right?
No, I don't think so. You don't want to mess with Kershaw's routine, and then Bobby Miller has shown he doesn't really need the opener.
Matt, do you think we see an opener from the Dodgers at any point this series?
I think so. I think I think game 3 or if there is a game 4, that those are sort of wild cards to potentially be some form of a bullpen game. I think also whenever Ryan Pepio pitches, I think they will put an opener in front of him, although I wouldn't necessarily do it. But I think that that's the direction they'll end up going.
I was just going to say game 3, if Pepio's the guy, I could see an opener. I don't think they'd use an opener ahead of Lance Lynn. That's just a guess because of just who he is as a person and sort of his history. But that would be my answer. Is I think if there's a bullpen game at some point, which none of us are expecting, but if it is Pepio in game 3, I could see Graterol or Shelby Miller maybe even being an opener in that spot. All right, let's get to an X factor. This is a question we get asked a lot, and it's a harder question to kind of answer without knowing who they're going to be facing. So now that we know it's the Diamondbacks, do you guys have a player? It could be a starter, could be a reliever, could be a hitter that you think is an X factor. And basically, I'm just going to take Mookie and Freddie off the table, and I'll let you pick anybody else. You want to take Kershaw? You want to take Bobby Miller? You want to take Evan Phillips? Any of those types of players? Anybody else is on the table. Now that we have a sense of the matchup, Matt, is there a guy for you that jumps out at you as the guy like, hey, you know what? If I had to take a stab at somebody coming up big in this series, I'm taking this guy.
I'll go Will Smith just because I think if he gets back on track,
Taking my guy here. Taking my guy, Moreno. Come on now.
It makes the lineup just that much deeper, especially up at the top. Whereas right now, if he's kind of been struggling, then maybe you get him to hit into a double play or something like that. But yeah, that's my pick.
Bob Nightingale, we appreciate you joining us. First time, long time. The X Factor will be Outman. Blake, if Bob Nightingale says the X Factor is Outman, does that mean it's definitely not going to be Outman?
I'm a little more surprised Outman is spelled correctly or not called someone else. But yeah, I think we have to rule out Outman now. Sorry about that, Bob.
Will Smith was going to be my guy, Matt, and it's because he's actually hit so well against Merrill Kelly and against Zach Gallen, who, again, potentially could be facing in 4 of these 5 games. He's 6 of 16 in his career against Gallen with a double, a triple, a walk, and 3 strikeouts. And against Kelly, he's 10 for 31 with 2 doubles and a homer with nearly as many walks as he has strikeouts. And shout out to Bob Nightingale. He says, oops, I spelled Rojas wrong. So, I mean, just kudos, just spot on there with that one. So Will Smith would be a guy for me because of maybe the questions and the doubt and the skepticism around him. And rightfully so, how poorly he has played over the last month, how poorly he has played in September and October throughout his entire career. I think it's fair, but there's a little bias in me as well as some historical evidence that make me picking Will Smith, the guy who might apparently, according to these two, is going to be coming off the bench in games 1 and game 4 against the, maybe he gets a big pinch hit opportunity in the 7th inning,
I said Kershaw would be starting game 5, so Will Smith can have his game 4 start. Season's on the line. Austin Barnes will be back in there.
Jeez Louise. Blake, who you got for an X Factor?
Can I cheat a little bit here and just say
you always cheat? Like you cheat all the time in this game. So just go for it.
The bottom third of the lineup, because it's all in the postseason. It's just always every year we see it consistently. A team ends up getting carried by just some player who you don't expect at the bottom of the lineup.
That's literally the point of the exercise we're doing, Blake, is not for you to just leave that player anonymous as 3 numbers at the bottom of the lineup. You're the expert in the bucket hat. You're supposed to be what good does the bucket hat do you if it's not telling you who the X Factor is going to be?
Well, I mean, you guys are picking Will Smith. I'm trying to go off the radar a little bit here. But if I have to pick
the bottom third, give me the 3 guys that are batting 7th and 8th and 9th is who are going to be the X Factors.
Depends on who the pitching matchup is, because they just always
change
the lineup. I was gonna say if I had to pick a specific guy, I'll throw up Miguel Rojas.
There you go.
Because he seems like a guy who's just gonna, put the ball in play a couple times and maybe get lucky. Or another option, maybe David Peralta, just revenge series. Like, I know he's been struggling. He's been one of their worst hitters in the second half of the season, but playing his former team, a chance for some revenge to knock him out and say, hey, you shouldn't have got rid of me kind of thing. Like, David Peralta seems like a guy who could just start going off a bit in that round.
Blake, you'll be happy to know that the chat is firmly in defense of you and your bucket hat. And I want to make clear, there's no insulting of the bucket hat here. I've got multiple bucket hats sitting right over here. Blake and I were the bucket hat boys at one point for one of these. So that was not an insult to the bucket hat. I want to be clear. Hayward is a guy that has been mentioned, and the Diamondbacks are going to be throwing all righties in this series. That's who Hayward feasts on. It's all he plays against. So I think Hayward's another guy that if you want to, I don't know if he falls in the 7, 8, 9, the bottom third of the lineup, maybe he's batting 6, so he doesn't qualify for Blake's bottom 3 grouping there. But I'm with you on that one. Do you want to defend Peralta, Blake? We've been getting a lot of comments and tweets about Peralta. Again, all righties. So Dave Roberts basically said it's going to be the same lineup you've seen all year against righties, which means Peralta and not Chris Taylor in that spot. Going against his former team, the Diamondbacks, you're picking him as an X Factor. So the floor is yours, my friend.
I mean, I'm not sure if I can defend him from a stats standpoint or anything. I mean, bluntly, he hasn't been good in the second half. He's been one of their worst hitters, just if not the worst hitter on the team. So it's more of just kind of a vibes pick Like the narrative sets
Love
up
that.
David Peralta sets up his
Would you
knocks
say
his former
for
team
our
out.
friend Matt, would you say it's an eye test kind of a thing?
No, because he hasn't even passed the eye test in the second half. It's just vibes and feels.
So
Like
vibes is
that's the
different category than
postseason.
eye test.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. That's just the postseason. Like you don't expect the guys to perform, and then they're the ones who end up performing. We just see it so often, all the time, and the narrative factor here, just facing his former team. Yeah.
Matt, your thoughts? I'm going to get my bucket hat on here to be in solidarity with Blake.
Yeah, Dave Roberts saying today that the lineup would basically be what we saw during the regular season when it's depending on if it's a right-handed or left-handed starter. It was, I don't want to say disappointing. That's too strong. But I then told you guys, hey, like I feel like Chris Taylor we should probably have a discussion about him starting in left field instead of Peralta, even if it is a right-handed starter. And I added the caveat that was based off my good old trusted eye test. And then thanks to Scotty, stats guy, he came with the nerd stats to back up my stance. And so him and I are aligned in that. He was throwing out weighted runs created plus and all those crazy computer things that you guys like to spit out and type in. And so, I mean, in all seriousness, I think Chris Taylor should be starting ahead of Peralta, regardless of whether it's a left-handed pitcher or right-handed pitcher. But, I guess I'll have to just kind of die on that hill and let that one go based off Dave Roberts' comments.
Yeah, and look, Chris Taylor was my X Factor pick like a week ago because I was like, hey, the guy's been on fire. We've talked about on this show how he's been one of the Dodgers' 3 or 4 best hitters for the last month or two. He has the playoff experience. He has the huge playoff moments. And yet, Robert says Peralta's going to be the guy there. I mean, is this, Blake, do you think it's a short leash situation? Like if Peralta goes 0 for 3, 0 for 4 in game 1, is Chris Taylor in the lineup for game 2? Or do you think he's the vet, he's the guy who hits righties, and they're just going to ride this one out?
I don't think Roberts is the one to make a panic move like that after one game. He'll trust in his guys. He tends to back his players all the time and always supports them. But also it kind of makes me think of last year, like if their season's on the line, then Cody Bellinger was the guy they took out. So maybe that could end up being Peralta this year. Matt doesn't look happy with me bringing that up.
Matt? The guy was terrible.
I have said repeatedly, and I am dying on the hill, that Cody Bellinger makes the catches in center field that Trace Thompson did not. And on top of all that, to Blake's point, Dave Roberts is not a manager that panics. That was a panic move at that point. You hadn't done it all year, and then all of a sudden you decided to do it. So Blake was teeing me up. I was going to say that Dave will wait until it gets to a game 4 or game 5 to then put Chris Taylor in the lineup.
Look, taking Cody Bellinger out was not a panic move. That was months overdue. His 2023 season aside. So, all right. Let me throw a couple some betting options at you, and you guys tell me what you like here. Okay. So, the Dodgers are minus 205 to win the series. That means they're heavy favorites. Zips, by the way, has them as a 62.4% chance to win. Matt, Scotty will send you an article later to explain what that means to you. Okay. So you could do none of us are betting minus 205. None of us have the cash to throw a big number down on minus 205 to win half that back. The Dodgers, here's a bet I like, even money to win game 1 and then to win the series. So I like that one, even money there. Dodgers over 20.5 runs, also even money. So that one you're kind of playing the how many games does it go? But I mean, even if they sweep, they could score 21 runs in 3 games. If they get swept, unlikely they get to 21 runs in 3 games, but there you go. You could get plus 320 for the Dodgers to win in 4, plus 320 for the Dodgers to win in 5, and plus 350 for the Dodgers to sweep. So I know we're going to get to predictions here, but Blake, Matt, I'll start with you, Blake. Any of those options jump out at you that you like?
If I had to bet on one, I'd probably take the Dodgers in 4. I think you said 320 it was.
Yeah.
Seems like the best value and the most likely outcome. Just sweeping a team's hard. I'm not sure. If everything goes right for the Dodgers, the Diamondbacks probably aren't taking them to 5 games. So Dodgers in 4 seems like a nice bet.
Matt?
I'll do the runs scored one. I'm not a huge betting guy, but that one seems okay. I could see them easily erupting for, 10 runs in one game, and then that lops off a huge number that you need to then get to.
One runs and RBIs and number, those are numbers you like too. So that's one that you could easily track there on your little scorebook, you know. So some game one props. I found these to be interesting. Kershaw's over under for outs. I don't know if either of you saw the show this morning, is 15.5. You can go under 15.5. So Kershaw not getting you more than 5.0 innings is minus 110. Like, that's crazy to me. I would pound the under, and not because I don't like Kershaw. Even if he pitches great, I see no scenario where he goes more than 5, right, Matt?
Yeah, I agree. I think that I see Kershaw going like 4 1/3 tomorrow.
Yeah. And again, and part of it is because even if he pitches well, you don't want him going 6 and not being available for game 4 would be my thought. Blake, you agree?
Probably, but his last start, they tried to get him through 6, or at least gave him that opportunity to go out there again. So if you bet that, he's probably going to end up going 5.1, and then they'll take him out just because, you know, Corbin Carroll's leading off that next inning, and then they want to go to the righty. But yeah.
Some other options here. Merrill Kelly under 5.5 strikeouts. That's minus 150. It's a big number. Kelly did not have more than 4 in any of his 3 starts against the Dodgers. So that's kind of a hedge against, I don't think Merrill Kelly lasts that long, and I don't think he gets that many strikeouts. You could do Kelly over 2.5 earned runs. That's basically even money. Dodgers to score 5 or more. Total is even money. And then if you want to get Mookie, Freddie, and Will Smith all to have at least 1 hit, that's plus 160. Matt, any of those? I know you're not a betting guy, but you've got Kelly under strikeouts, Kelly over runs, Dodger over runs, Mookie, Freddie, and Will all to get a hit. Any of those you like?
I'm taking all of them except for that last one. I'm not. When you need 3 players to get 1 hit, when one of them's Will Smith, who I think can turn it around, and who I just named as the X factor. I know, but to then to bet when I'm adverse to betting to begin with, to then bet on something like that, it's just not that wouldn't sit with me.
Blake,
can we believe Matt saying he's not a betting guy and then saying give me all those bets? Like, just throw money on all 5 of them for me. I think I'd take the Dodgers over 5 runs. I think it was, you said.
Yeah, over 4.5.
So 5 runs. Yeah, I think that seems pretty safe. If they're going to win that game, that's probably what I'd bet on.
Yeah, and again, you know, if you think Kelly gives up 2 or 3, a guy they've crushed this year, and then they face one of the worst bullpens in the league, all, you know, guys that they've probably have some familiarity with as well. So there you go. Well, let's get to some questions, and then we'll get to some predictions at the end of this one. But throw some, if you got any questions for us, all caps questions in the chat. We'll get to a few of those. Again, thanks to everybody joining us live on YouTube, live on Facebook. To those watching after the fact, we appreciate you, and podcast stuff as well. Apple, Spotify, Google, search for DodgerHeads. We greatly appreciate it. Michael's got our first question. Surprised it took us this long. If the Dodgers lose this series, do you think people start to question Roberts at the helm? The national baseball media doesn't even consider him in the top 5 managers currently. I'm going to take the question down only because it's blocking our good friend Blake's face, and all we can see is the bucket hat, which we love bucket hats here, as you can tell. I actually, with all due respect, Michael, I think the national media thinks way more highly of Dave Roberts than Dodger fans do. I think Dodger fans have been questioning Roberts for years, and I think the national media loves Dave Roberts. Matt, you're nodding your head. You agree with that?
Yeah, Michael, I was going to push back at kind of both of those. People start questioning Roberts. He's been questioned since basically day one.
Yeah.
And I agree, Jeff, you just said, national media views, if you poll national media, Dave Roberts is finishing no worse than 3rd among all managers. And he's probably even top 2.
Highest win percentage in Major League history.
And what I would go back to, I guess if they were to get swept by the Diamondbacks, then maybe there's some job security discussions. But what I still kind of fall back on is last year's team had all the talent in the world, set the franchise record for most wins, flamed out in pretty deflating, if not disappointing fashion. And there was no talk amongst the Dodgers, front office of potentially relieving Dave of his duties. So I short of if the Diamondbacks sweep them in this series, I don't see any scenario this postseason where Dave would come under scrutiny, I guess, from within the team.
Yeah. Blake, you agree?
I agree. And I think the Dodgers front office is considering, the postseason has so much randomness to it. As we've mentioned, the key factor here. And also, we have to point out, the Dodgers were projected to win around 92 games this year.
There were some people, Blake. Can you believe that there were some people that had the under on that number? It's amazing.
Yeah, so with all the injuries and everything they had, with the Julio Urias getting arrested, and just everything about this season was a challenge for the team, and they still went out and won 100 games. And I think that's a testament to Dave Roberts and how good of a job he did. And I think the front office is going to recognize that, and they're not going to move on just because they lost one series when there's just all that randomness that goes into it.
Yeah, look, if Dave Roberts has an end of season review, he's going to walk in with a piece of paper, and it's going to have a picture of Bob Melvin on one side. It's going to have a picture of Buck Showalter on the other. And he's going to say, if you think that this is easy, here are two people that completely underperform with arguably more talented rosters. And yet I'm the guy that keeps winning 100 games for you for, like we've said, 4 consecutive full seasons in a row. The first time it's ever happened in Major League history. Yada, yada, yada. So I think he already is being questioned. I think the national media loves him. But, look, there's always going to be a dialogue around Dave Roberts. And as we've highlighted, he's going to be making way more decisions this year than he's ever made. There are way more opportunities for him to make bad decisions. And if you've been watching this show for a while, you know that we do not shy away from highlighting those when they come up. Blake, I'll send this one to you. David wants to know, do you think Muncy's fielding troubles at third will haunt the Dodgers in the playoffs? We've talked about this briefly, but I'll let you answer it again.
I don't know if haunt is the right word. Muncy hasn't been a good defender for quite a while this year. There was a stretch where he was graded above average, but as we know, with defensive metrics, they're a little flawed. So it could be a problem, but at the same time, I also personally think the chance that him making an error in that specific moment where it comes back to beat them, I don't think that's really going to happen. I think it just has really slim odds. So it's not ideal, but I think there's bigger things to worry about.
Okay. Ederico's got 2 questions. Can the Dodgers stop Corbin Carroll? And who do you think wins the AL pennant for the remaining teams? Baltimore, Houston, Minnesota, and Texas. Matt, let's start with the AL one, and we'll circle back to Corbin Carroll. If you had to pick one of those 4 teams, the Orioles, the Astros, the Twins, and the Rangers, you have a gut feel there.
Yeah, I hate to do it. I wish Scott would be better off answering this question. I'll answer it for Scott. I think he would probably pick the Astros, so that's
He's picking against this guy Correa, you think?
I think so. I think he still can appreciate the Astros farm system and their player development, as he likes to sort of explain it. So I think if Scott would pick the Astros, then that's who I'll say would win.
You're big follow the nerds guy there, so you're following Scott on that one. Blake?
I'm going with the Rangers.
Yeah, that's going to be my pick.
They have solid pitching at the top. They've got a few really good hitters in their lineup, and Corey Seager carrying them in that ballpark. Give me the Rangers here.
That was going to be my pick as well. It feels like we're getting too cute and not taking the Orioles, who are just sitting there staring at us, but give me the Rangers as well. Can the Dodgers stop Corbin Carroll? I think is an interesting one. The thing I will say is, maybe one of the greatest strengths of the Dodgers is their ability to target matchups and get creative in ways. Like if they highlight one particular person, like it was the Juan Soto, from a few years ago, where they just, it was like Kolarek, right? Who was the guy who just came in every time Soto, like, now the rules have changed since then, yada, yada,
every
yada.
time.
But, yeah. But like, I just think, thank you. You're welcome. I just think that, like, the Dodgers can get creative. And so I would say, if I had to choose, I actually think the Dodgers will succeed against Corbin Carroll, would be my guess, because he's going to face Kershaw against a lefty in game 1. And I think the Dodgers can just find ways, if they so choose, to get, if he gets 4 at bats, he's going to see Kershaw twice. He's going to see Caleb Ferguson once, and he's going to see Vesia once, and maybe it's Brusdar or Evan Phillips. Besides that, like, I just think, if that's the guy that they choose to say, we need to shut him down, everything begins with him, I think they can. So I would actually lean towards, I think they can limit Corbin Carroll. We'll say that. Matt, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. I was going to say, I don't know if they'll necessarily stop him, but I think they'll definitely slow him down enough to really stifle the Diamondbacks offense.
Blake?
It's the boring answer, but yeah, I think they can. I mean, you can get any hitter out if you execute well. So just up to them executing.
Yeah. Look, Corbin Carroll's very good. Nobody's arguing against that here. Okay, Michael wants to know, what pitchers would you want to piggyback? We've kind of answered this. I would love to see Kershaw and Emmett Sheehan coming in right behind him. Bobby Miller, I probably wouldn't need to see a piggyback necessarily out of. And then Pepio, and I don't know. I guess game 3, maybe it's Pepio and Lynn in some combination in game 3, but Sheehan would be the guy that I'd like to see in game 1. Matt?
Yeah, I agree with that. Part of me wonders, though, if there's a scenario where they use Kershaw and Pepio in game 1 to.
But could they with the simulated game or whatever they just did?
That's right. Yeah.
Isn't he
Well,
unavailable?
yeah, I guess I don't know how many. Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, never mind. So before today, had Pepio not faced batters, part of me wondered if maybe they would have paired him with Kershaw in game 1 to really try to save the bullpen at all costs. But so yeah, considering that scenario is ruled out, I think Sheehan following Kershaw makes the most sense. That's honestly the only piggyback option I see them doing, because they won't do it for Bobby Miller. Lance Lynn will make a regular start, and Pepio would probably follow an opener, which isn't the piggyback arrangement.
Blake?
I agree with what Matt said. I think it's going to be Kershaw and Sheehan in game 1, and then Pepio is going to follow the opener.
Okay. All right. We've got a good food question here. This one just made me laugh. So Michael, we'll throw this one up here. Is there a food that you will always eat despite the fact that it gives you stomach problems? I just love that. I just love the idea of like you looking at something on the menu and saying, I'm not going to feel awesome in 12 hours. I'll take that, please. Matt, is there anything? I mean, I'll just say mine, like sour cream doesn't settle well with my stomach. I just love sour cream on Mexican food. And so I just take the L on that one. I mean, dairy in general is not awesome, but it's like ice cream, milkshakes. It's like, yeah, just sign me up for that. We'll deal with the consequences later.
Yeah, I'm fortunate that my stomach has gone through a lot of training in different foods that I've eaten, so it's conditioned to handle some pretty heavy stuff in that regard.
Blake, anything?
I'm not sure there is one for me. Like, I'm already kind of a picky eater, as I'm sure you guys have found out over the course of this year on the show. But
unless it's IHOP, then we broaden our horizons.
But yeah, then I'm not eating there. So yeah, I don't think I really have one.
Okay, Dong's got one more. Do you have a favorite Arizona tea flavor? Matt, this feels like it's just being said on a tea for you.
Yes, I have show and tell too. The green tea, if you're watching on YouTube, best one.
Okay, Blake, sweet tea.
I do like the Arizona teas, but they have an Arizona fruit punch that I like a lot. So I'll go with that one.
I try and stay away from sugary drinks. So I'm an unsweetened iced tea guy. I don't think Arizona has an unsweetened iced tea. That's pretty much, it feels like against everything that they stand for, which is how much sugar can we place into an oversized can. So there we go. Man, we got some questions here just flowing in. IV wants to know favorite regular season moment. That's a tough one. I'm trying to think. Something comes to mind right away.
Maybe Kershaw reaching milestones.
Yeah.
Actually, Freddie Freeman, what did he do? I think, wasn't it against the Astros? He hit a double or something. Was it on his birthday? He hit a double. I just remember him being at second base and getting a huge standing ovation, but I don't remember what it was.
I'm blanking. Blake, do you remember?
I don't remember, but I have my moment.
Okay, go for it.
Austin Barnes' first homer of the season when all the players went crazy for him, and yeah, that was a fun moment.
I mean, Dodgers clinching. That feels like a super lame answer, but
Yeah, Brewster and his mom, someone threw out.
There you go. That's a great answer. That's a great answer. I'm a recency guy. Trading for Lance Lynn. Come on now. The live show where they traded for Ryan Yarbrough right before the end, and we were all like, Ryan, what how do you spell that last name exactly? What's his name? That was a good moment there. I mean, we had the trade deadline I thought was fun. The Dodgers just making a move every couple of days. I just think the young guys getting opportunities was fun.
Should I get sentimental on everybody?
What's that?
Should I get sentimental on everybody?
Let's do it.
It's all our Sunday shows with the live streams that we do and all the fans and followers and the engagement that we get.
I love that. I love that. Matt that's why he's the boss right there, Blake. That's it. Eric wants to know, last one here, Matt, is the press box food any better during the playoffs?
A little bit, at least in like the effort is there. It doesn't always pan out as such. But like today for the workout, they did have nachos to accompany Dodger Dogs, which was a change from throughout the season when they mainly just do Dodger Dogs. So that was nice.
Do we have like jalapenos available, salsa? What do we got? Or just chips and
There
cheese?
was some, no, that, yeah, there was some jalapenos. There was salsa. I think maybe even onions. I don't remember, but yeah.
You just went straight chips and cheese?
Of course.
Okay. No jalapenos?
No, it's fine. I don't care. Like, they're okay. I don't care to eat them. Like, I really enjoy cheese, so I would just, kind of focus all my attention there.
All right. Well, let's close this one out with some predictions. Dodgers versus Diamondbacks. If you saw my show with Daniel, then you've already heard my prediction, my false prediction, and then me correcting myself. If you missed it, I said the opposing team in 5 games. I'm not going to say it again because Moreno's already clipped the first one. We don't need 2 of these running around. I said the other team in 5 and then immediately corrected myself and said the Dodgers in 5. So I've got the Dodgers in 5. That's how I see this one playing out. Matt?
I'm going, if you were with us for our Sunday show before the Wild Card Series started, I was pretty, dismissive of the Diamondbacks. And so I'm leaning all the way into that. And I think the Dodgers sweep them. And I'll add the twist of whoever wins game 1, I think wins the series.
Okay, there we go. Blake? Do it, Blake. Just, I see the big smile on your face. Just do it. Say what you want to say here.
I wore it in 2021. I brought the balance against the Giants. So if you need to do that for the sake of bringing balance to the show, then
I picked against them in 2020 too, I think.
Yeah, you did.
Diamondbacks in 4, but they're losing at 4.
No, you need to.
Diamondbacks losing in 4.
You said Diamondbacks in 4.
Yeah, but they're losing in 4.
He was trying to set us up.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so Dodgers in 4. Good for you, Blake. A couple more moments we just got to throw in. I love Laura here. Her favorite moment was Syndergaard getting DFA'd. So, I mean, come on. It's with all due respect. And then Jason says meeting Matt on the escalator in Dodger Stadium was his favorite regular season moment. So there you go. There you go. We've got
Jason.
Laura, Dodgers in 4. Doom's got Dodgers sweep. Adam wants a sweep. Aderico in 4. So there we go. Even Blake's picking the Dodgers. The bucket hats, baby. Let's go.
I mean, the D-backs picked me, but the Dodgers didn't pick me this year. The Diamondbacks approved my credentials to go cover them, but the Dodgers didn't. So I'm just saying, if the Dodgers don't win, that's probably the reason.
That's probably the reason. There you go. Well, hey, everybody, we appreciate you joining us. In case you are new around here, we will be having some pre and post game shows for all of these games. I know, unfortunately, the schedule didn't line up awesomely for me, but thankfully we've got a great team of folks that will be helping with that. So pre and post game shows for the NLDS. Make sure you subscribe, ring the notification bell here on Dodger Blue 1958 on YouTube. Of course, we've got folks that will be at the stadium. Matt and or Blake will be at the stadium covering these games, which is awesome. So we get unprecedented access to that on this show, which is awesome. You can always check us out via podcast. DodgerHeads on Apple, Spotify, and Google. And then, of course, we'll have some of our normal content coming throughout the week as well. So that's Matt Moreno. That's Blake Williams. We appreciate everybody for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your night. Get ready. It's Friday. When you wake up tomorrow, the Dodgers will be playing in the NLDS in the evening, 6:00. It's going to be an amazing day. So enjoy the rest of your night, folks. And as always, go Dodgers.